Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here for our monthly third Thursday IHE Lunch and Learn. We're so happy you could be here. And I hope that those of you who attended our community commemoration of Yom HaShoah last night found it as meaningful as we did. Today, we are very fortunate to have Kelly Tichauer-Kirk as our presenter. Her talk is entitled "My Path, a third generation Holocaust survivor, conversation about my family's Holocaust history and the journey to becoming a Holocaust educator." Beginning in her teen years, Kelly began her lifetime passion for learning about the Holocaust. In 2018, along with her father and sister, she traveled to Germany and Poland on a mission to better understand her family's past and learn about their experiences during the Holocaust. Her life-changing trip led to her pursuit of a master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies with the goal of educating others about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. And it's our honor to have her today here with us today. And I turn it over now to you, Kelly. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. So really quickly, I'm just going to share my screen. Is that good, Scott? You good? Okay. Good afternoon. Before I start, I want to first thank Scott Litke for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. This is the first time I've spoken publicly, and I appreciate the chance to share my journey and my family with all of you. Also, thank you for those of you attending the Zoom today. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Kelly Tichauer-Kirk. I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. I've been married to my husband, Thomas, for 24 years in May. We have 3 children: Lauren, who is graduating from the University of Alabama next month, Emily, who is a sophomore at the University of Kansas, and Jake, who is a senior in high school. I have a bachelor's degree in political science from UNO and am currently in the final stretch of earning my master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Gratz College in Melrose Park, Pennsylvania. Outside of school and in real life, I'm a full-time real estate professional at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Ambassador Real Estate. As Scott said, my talk today is called My Path, a 3G conversation about my family's Holocaust history and the journey to becoming a Holocaust educator. That said, I want to briefly go back to my childhood and early teen years to talk about the very beginnings of my journey and how it led me on the path to where I am today. I'm a third generation survivor of the Holocaust with 4 survivor grandparents: Walter and Helena Tichauer and Ben and Mina Maurer. I'm also a second generation immigrant. My father, Fred, was born in Montevideo, Uruguay, and came to the United States when he was 12. My mother, Marty, was born in a displaced persons camp in Landsberg, Germany, and came to the United States when she was 3 months old. Growing up, I always knew I wasn't like the other kids. I was different. I was a Jewish girl with 4 Holocaust survivor grandparents that spoke in German, Yiddish, or Spanish, broken English with heavy accents, and I had immigrant parents. I was definitely not the definition of a typical Midwestern girl. I would be lying if I said being different wasn't embarrassing and at times a burden when I was growing up, because let's be honest, what child doesn't want to fit in and be like everyone else? It wasn't until I was in my teens that I started to realize that being different wasn't weird or something to be embarrassed about. It was special and ultimately an opportunity to help make a difference in our world. From the realization as a teen that my family background and history relating to the Holocaust was extremely unique, I began an almost obsession-like need to learn everything I could about the Holocaust. At times, my desire to learn led to voices of concern regarding the graphic intensity of the topic from my parents and teachers, but I was never deterred. I read books on every topic from Hitler and Oskar Schindler to Auschwitz and other concentration camps, to stories of survivors, as well as having firsthand accounts from my own grandparents. All I read and heard left a profound and unforgettable impression on me, one that is still with me today. As a teen, not only did I read about the Holocaust outside of school, but I often chose to give speeches and write papers in school about the topic. I regularly spoke out in class and even in casual conversation with my peers about the Holocaust when the opportunity came up. Woven into each paper, speech, or conversation was also discussion of anti-Semitism. I became known by some as the Holocaust girl. Looking back now, it was during those teen years I unknowingly began educating those around me about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. To start, I want to share a poem I wrote about the Holocaust in 1989 as a 13-year-old to represent the beginning of my journey. It was written with my grandparents in mind and was dedicated to all of them. The poem ended with the phrase, "From now on, we must be the teachers." Little did I know, almost 35 years later, I would be close to finishing my master's in Holocaust and Genocide Studies with the goal of educating others about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. Now I want to shift gears and fast forward to 2018. In September, I went to Germany and Poland with my father, Fred, and my sister, Randy. Our trip was twofold: a family finding mission and exploration relating to the Holocaust, and an overall Holocaust education trip. I'd like to share my trip experiences with you, as well as my thoughts and feelings about the trip, and combine that with my maternal grandmother, Kelly Tichauer's Holocaust story. My intent is not to leave my other grandparents out, but of the four, her story is the one I know best because she was the most outspoken and open about her life and her Holocaust experience. Before I begin Helena's story, though, I do want to mention what I know about my mother's parents. I also want to mention that I'm going to attempt to pronounce names in Polish and German, so forgive me in advance for any mispronunciations. My mother's parents, Ben and Mina Mauer, were both born in Poland. Ben in November 1906 in a village near the province of Rzeszów, and Mina in July 1919 in Rzeszina near Łódź. Rzeszina was once a thriving Jewish shtetl known for its tailors. Interestingly, my grandmother was a tailor by trade in Poland and when she came to the United States. She had a tailor shop off of 72nd and Blondo called Mauer's Tailor Shop, which I remember going to often as a child. Here is a picture of my grandparents, Ben and Mina Mauer. This picture was taken sometime after 1945 in Warsaw. From what I've been able to determine through my own research, my grandfather Ben was in the Ulanów ghetto from 1940 to 1942. Ulanów is about 100 miles from Warsaw. He was then sent to the Częstochowa ghetto in 1942, which is also near Warsaw. Many inhabitants in the ghetto worked at a munitions factory, so it's likely that's also what he did. From Częstochowa, he was sent to Dachau, which is where he stayed until he was liberated in 1945. After 1945, the timeline and his location is unclear, but he was in Warsaw in January 1947, according to official records. He met my grandmother, Mina, in Warsaw. From Warsaw, he was in two displaced persons camps, Hofgeismar and Landsberg, with Mina. My grandparents were married in 1949 in the Landsberg DP camp, which is where my mother was born. They had three daughters, my mother, Marty, and my aunts, Esther and Rebecca, who have both passed. The entire family came to Omaha via the International Refugee Organization, leaving from Munich on February 13th, 1950 to New York, thanks to their sponsor, which was called at the time the Federation for Jewish Services, located on North 20th Street in Omaha. This is the flight manifest showing my mother's family leaving Munich and coming to Omaha. The arrow is pointing to their names: Berish, Mina, Estera, Rivka, and Malka. I also want to share my mother's displaced persons registration card. Every displaced person had one. The card shows her name, registration number, birth date, birthplace, and location, which was the Landsberg DP camp, names of her parents and siblings, her religion, and nationality. My grandmother, Mina, was likely in the Rzeszina ghetto, her hometown, which was established in spring of 1940, and was imprisoned there with approximately 6,000 Jews, until it was liquidated in May of 1942, and she was sent to the Lodz ghetto. In December of 1942, she was sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp, then to Dachau on March 5th, 1945, and finally to Turkheim, a sub-camp of Dachau, where she was liberated on April 27th, 1945. Like with my grandfather, it's after her liberation that the timeline becomes blurred, but she was also in Warsaw in January 1947, according to official records. Luckily, I have a copy of Mina's official concentration camp record from the Dachau concentration camp, which is what you're looking at. It's been extremely helpful in trying to piece together what happened to her during the Holocaust. The record shows her name, ID number, case number, date of birth, her parents' names, nationality, profession, body size, face size, shape, eye color. Essentially everything that defines and describes a person was documented on this report. It also shows the date she was arrested and sent to Ravensbrück and when she arrived at Dachau. I'm still in the process of researching my maternal grandparents, but it's been very difficult as official records are scarce, spellings of names aren't consistent, and they weren't as open or forthcoming with sharing their Holocaust experience. I hope to learn more as I continue researching. Now I want to turn to my grandmother, Helena Tichauer, and to my trip. My grandmother was born Helena Shulkin in Krakow, Poland on December 9th, 1922. She was the eldest of Carol and Carolina Shulkin's 3 children. Her sister was Lola Reinglass, who has since passed, but was also an Omaha resident. And the youngest in the family was her brother, Nathan. Her father was a World War I veteran, a graduate of the University of Austria, a respected and successful electrical engineer, and the owner of his own company. Her mother was a housewife. The Shulkin family was upper middle class and enjoyed a life filled with the finer things: proper schooling, domestic help, and vacations together, with swimming and hiking filled summers in the country and winter skiing trips to the mountains in the winter. Here is a picture of Helena's family. This is the only picture I have of the complete Shulkin family. Top left is my grandmother, Helena. Next to her is my great aunt Lola. Seated is my great grandfather, Carol, and my great grandmother, Carolina. And in front of them is my great uncle, Nathan. The Shulkins lived at 41 Grodzka Street, one of the oldest streets in Krakow. It was once part of the royal route used by Polish royalty to reach Wawel Castle. We found my grandmother's childhood home on our trip to Poland. And here's my father standing in front of his mother's home in Krakow, which is now a major tourist area filled with many shops and restaurants. Before the German occupation of Poland in September 1939, Helena and her family lived a very happy, peaceful, and normal life. Her family was quite large, as her father was one of 12 children, so there were always many aunts, uncles, and cousins around. Of the 12 siblings, just 3 survived the Holocaust. Helena was just a 16-year-old girl with 2 years of high school under her belt, with dreams of becoming a physician when the war broke out on September 1st, 1939, changing her life forever. Within days of the beginning of the war, the Nazis invaded Krakow on September 6th, 1939, and began to forever destroy the centuries-long history of the Jewish population of Krakow. Immediately, persecution of the Jews began. Posters announcing the new Nazi regime's rules immediately appeared across the city, and life as the Shulkin family had known immediately stopped. Everything the family had once taken for granted was gone, and they were made to feel like outcasts in their own city. It was almost as if they had never belonged. Helena's father was forced to close his business and let go of his employees. A curfew was enforced. Jewish businesses, restaurants, and shops that weren't forced to close were marked with the Star of David. A tax was imposed on Jews, and they weren't allowed to buy or sell property. Synagogues were closed, and religious artifacts and treasures were confiscated. Jewish schools were closed. Food was rationed, and all Jews over 12 were forced to wear a white band with the blue Star of David on their right arm, targeting them for abuse. This was Helena's ID card from October 1940. As you can see, the Nazi symbol is there, the swastika and the eagle stamped on the document. Most interestingly, in German, it says deferred from resettlement. In October of 1940, the Nazis were expelling Jews from Krakow to other areas of Poland, but for some unknown reason, and thankfully so, Helena was allowed to stay in Krakow. This is another form of identification, a registration form that all Jewish residents of Krakow in 1940 were required to complete. The registration was coordinated by the Jewish community in Krakow by Nazi order. The document is dated August 8th, 1940, and it includes name, date, place of birth, nationality, occupation, marital status, residence, of course, religion, and a photo. In March 1941, the ghettoization of Krakow was set in motion. Helena and her family, along with the rest of the city's Jewish population, were ordered by the Nazis to gather up no more than 5 pounds of belongings per person and were marched across the river Vistula into a former Gentile district called Poguzha. The Shulkins left everything they owned behind at 41 Grodzka other than what they were allowed to take. Approximately 3,000 non-Jewish Polish residents moved out of Poguzha to be replaced by over 15,000 Jews. The area would be known as the Krakow Ghetto. It was surrounded by a stone wall and barbed wire. It was a horrible, cruel, overcrowded, depressing, and dilapidated place to live. The ghetto was sealed on March 21st, 1941, and nobody could leave without a pass. Today, all that's left of the Krakow Ghetto wall are 2 sections. This picture is one of them. It's approximately 40 feet in length. And as you can see, the upper part of the wall is rounded, which was made that way to replicate Jewish gravestones. This picture was taken on my trip to Poland. In the ghetto, Helena and her family of 4 were crammed into one small 2-room flat with another family of 5. It was miserable both in and outside their ghetto home. Living conditions were atrocious. Food was in short supply. Overcrowding was rampant, spreading disease and illness. The sewage system was overwhelmed and trash was everywhere because the garbage trucks couldn't keep up with the mountains of trash. Helena's father, in an act of defiance against the Nazis, refused to turn in the family's valuables to the authorities. He hid them, taking great risks to himself and the family. They used the jewelry and silver to barter with Poles and Germans for precious food provisions that were in short supply. Not only were the living conditions horrific, but fear ruled every single aspect of people's lives. The ghetto was subject to frequent raids and acts of random violence by the Nazis, who would enter the ghetto to conduct searches, often resulting in killings and roundups that led to deportation of Jews to concentration camps. Nobody was safe. Enforced labor in the ghetto was mandatory for all able-bodied people, regardless of age. Each member of the Shulkin family was forced to work, except for my grandmother's brother Nathan, because he was too weak and frail. Carolina, my great-grandmother, repaired military uniforms. Carol, my great-grandfather, was able to use his skills as an electrical engineer inside and outside the ghetto. Lola, my great-aunt, was transported by truck each morning to clean at a Krakow hospital, and Helena swept dirt from the street and sidewalk during the summer and shoveled snow in the winter. Despite living in misery, the Shulkin family made the best of a horrible situation. At least they were all together for now. In October of 1942, the Nazi regime established Camp Plaszow on the grounds of 2 Jewish cemeteries. If you've seen Steven Spielberg's film Schindler's List, Plaszow is the camp depicted in the movie. In late 1942, Helena, along with her sister and parents, were rounded up from the Krakow ghetto and sent to Plaszow. Before being sent, Helena's family was assembled with other ghetto occupants in preparation for the approximately 2-mile march to the camp. The Gestapo began pulling the young and sick out of line, including her brother Nathan. He was 13, but very small for his age. Helena's mother pulled him back, and that's when the Gestapo told her she would be killed with her son right then and there unless she let him go. He was taken away, never to be seen again. He was murdered in the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Like Helena, this is Nathan's registration form. He registered on the same day as Helena, August 8th, 1940. It would be just 2 short years after this registration that he would be murdered in Auschwitz at the age of 13. Once in Plaszow, Helena was separated from her sister, who ended up in different barracks, and from her father, who was in a section of camp for the males, but she was able to remain with her mother. Occasionally, the family was able to see each other, which offered a few minutes of relief from absolute despair. But for the most part, it was just Helena and her mother, Carolina, on their own. Eventually, Lola and her father were shipped to another camp altogether. I'd like to share some pictures of Plaszow as it looks today. Here is the entrance to the camp. If you didn't know it was a former concentration camp and you weren't looking for it, you would likely miss it. It's remained mostly untouched since the war ended, and what's left is almost park-like with wide open spaces, trees, brushes, and wildflowers. People bike, run, and walk their dogs through the former camp. It's one of the strangest, most confusing and disturbing places I've ever been. So much terror, horror, and death once filled the entire site, and yet during my visit, it was calm and peaceful with birds singing, the sun was shining, and people were enjoying themselves as if it was a park. It's been said that plans are in the works to make Plaszow into a museum similar to Auschwitz. Though Plaszow was initially designed as a forced labor camp and not an official concentration camp until 1944, it was a hellish place. Helena's job at Plaszow was pounding rocks with the hammer into gravel at a quarry. It was exhausting, extremely hard, and back-breaking work. If you couldn't work, or if you didn't work hard enough, you faced brutal beatings or death. The food the inmates received was barely enough to keep a human being alive, let alone provide enough energy to do hard labor. Each day, Helena was given a slice of bread and coffee in the morning and rutabaga broth at night. This open area is where the camp roll call took place twice a day. The prisoners would stand sometimes for hours in the rain, snow, or scorching sun, while every single prisoner was counted. While waiting, prisoners at times would be terrorized and tortured. As you can see, the area now looks like a park. These are the ruins of the former funeral parlor in Plaszow that had just been completed in 1932. Amon Gut, the camp commandant, ordered it to be used as a stable for horses, cows, and pigs. In 1944, he had it blown up in stages for entertainment purposes. This is a picture of one of the two Jewish cemeteries located on the site of Plaszow. One was founded in 1887 and one in 1932. When the Germans arrived in Krakow, they destroyed the old cemetery and used the tombstones to line the main roads of the camp. Prisoner barracks were built on top of the newer cemetery. The camp commandant of Plaszow, Amon Gut, ruled the camp like a sadistic tyrant. He executed people for the slightest infraction or for no reason at all. Helena said Gut would shoot people for sport and line their bodies up, forcing prisoners like her to look at them. He was pure evil. At the opposite end of the spectrum was Oskar Schindler, the German businessman who was well known among the prisoners at Plaszow for doing business with the Nazis in the camp where his Jews were protected. Helena's sister Lola believes a fateful encounter with Schindler saved her life. Caught trying to sneak food to her father, Lola said a man she recognized as Schindler after the fact beat her rather than let her be shot by an SS soldier. As an amazing side note, in my research this past year, I found out that my great-grandfather Carol's brother, Kopel Shulkin, was a Schindler Jew. I have a list of Schindler's Jews. Here is one of those pages of the list. Of the almost 1,100 names that made up the list of Schindler's Jews, my great-great-uncle Kopel Shulkin is number 502 on the list. His brother, like his brother, he was an electrical engineer, so it's easy to see how Schindler could say he was essential. If you've seen the movie Schindler's List, then you will remember the red and the gray house. This is the red house. It was Amon Gut's villa. He was known to torture and kill Jews and order his dogs to viciously attack Jews in his home. Amid controversy, this property was sold to a private Polish family in 2015, The property was completely renovated for him and his family. This is the Gray House. Initially, the house was the administrative building for the Jewish cemetery, but became the offices of Amon Gut and the high SS officers. In 1943, the Nazis created a prison in the basement with solitary cells that were called standing bunkers. They were so small that the prisoners could only stand. Prisoners were also tortured here. Once they came into the house, it was said they never left. It was also from the balcony that Gut supposedly randomly shot prisoners in the camp for no reason other than for his entertainment. In Plaszow, as the days turned to weeks, Helena, at 19 years old, watched her mother begin to grow weaker by the day. Helena was also feeling the effects of her own imprisonment, and she often thought about giving up. She easily could have. She said she could have thrown herself into the electrified wire fence and been finished with her life, but she couldn't do it. She knew she had to not only fight for her life, but for her mother's too, and she made it her mission to do all she could to keep living and to care for her mother. Her mother was weak, malnourished, had tuberculosis, bronchitis, and thrombosis in both legs. Helena knew if her mother was unable to work or if she appeared unfit in the least, she would be defined as disposable and would be a target for extermination. Helena forced her mother to work. She pushed her and pushed her, telling her if she didn't work, they would kill her. Helena also came up with a brave and clever plan to help fool the guards into thinking her mother was stronger and healthier than she was. If she was discovered, both of them would have been killed. Somehow, Helena had managed to keep and hide one tube of lipstick after arriving at Plaszow, even after all of the humiliating searches. Each morning, she would put lipstick on her mother's cheeks so she would have color in her face and appear to be healthier than she was. It worked. Helena helped save her mother's life with a tube of lipstick. In such horrific emotional and physical circumstances, it's a miracle Helena survived, let alone also ensuring her mother's survival. With all Helena and her mother went through together, it was in Plaszow that an unbreakable mother-daughter survivor's bond of the deepest and strongest kind was forged. In 1944, Lola and her father were transported from Plaszow to other camps. Though they weren't all together in Plaszow, Helena knew they were near. Once they were gone, the harsh reality that it was just her and her mother all alone fighting for their survival became very real. It wasn't long after her sister and father left that Helena and her mother were also transported from Plaszow. They were taken by cattle cars in horrific conditions to Auschwitz. All Helena knew is what she had heard from others. She was told evil was in Auschwitz and was convinced they were being taken there to die. Luckily, they were only in Auschwitz for a very short time, and at the beginning of 1945, Helena and her mother were transported from Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen. In 2018, I had the opportunity to visit Auschwitz. Located near Oświęcim in German-occupied Poland, southwest of Krakow, Auschwitz was the largest and one of the most lethal Nazi death camps. Nearly 1.1 million people were murdered there, including multiple members of my family. Auschwitz was massive in size. It was made up of 3 main camps: Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II Birkenau, and Auschwitz III Monowitz, plus an additional 50 satellite camps. I'd like to share some pictures of Auschwitz from my trip. So here is the famous Arbeit macht frei gate, meaning work sets you free. And this is the gate into Auschwitz I. These are the canisters of Zyklon B, the highly poisonous cyanide gas used to murder people in the Auschwitz. Oops. There we go. Used to murder people in the Auschwitz gas chambers. This is the gas chamber in Auschwitz I. This gas chamber operated from August 1940 to July 1943. It was phased out once the gas chambers at Birkenau were fully operational. And this is the crematorium in Auschwitz I. After 1943, it was no longer used, again, because Birkenau had become the main killing center. Near the crematorium was the luxury villa that belonged to Rudolf Höss the commandant of Auschwitz. In the background of this picture, you can see the villa behind the trees. He lived there with his wife and 5 children in luxury. It was located on the corner of the camp, surrounded by a walled garden and high trees to obscure the view of the chimney of the crematorium so his family didn't have to look at it. In 1947, Huss was tried and sentenced to death. He was returned to Auschwitz to be hanged on a 1-person gallows built outside the entrance to the gas chamber. This is the entrance to Birkenau. This is the picture of what was once known as the Auschwitz-Birkenau Death Gate. This view is from the inside entrance to Birkenau. The building it passes through is the main SS guardhouse. Through this entrance came millions of men, women, and children that were selected to live or die. Less than 25% of people arriving in Auschwitz even made it to the camp. Most were immediately sent to the gas chambers. This was one of the Auschwitz women's barracks. Women were sent here to die when they were no longer useful. They were given no food or water. This picture is one of the 4 crematoriums at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The Nazis attempted to destroy it when the Allied forces were approaching. On April 15th, 1945, Helena and her mother were liberated from Bergen-Belsen by American soldiers. At liberation, both Helena and her mother weighed approximately 65 pounds each. Though Helena wasn't well, her mother was quite ill. Their recovery began in Germany and continued in Sweden in June 1945. It was in Sweden when Helena learned her sister Lola was alive. But by the time they were able to exchange letters, Helena and her mother were bound for Uruguay, where relatives lived. Helena's father, my great-grandfather Carol, survived the Holocaust, but tragically died 2 days after his liberation from Flossenburg in 1945. Helena said she believed her father willed himself to stay alive in order to keep a vow he made that he would live to see the day that Hitler was defeated. In Uruguay, Helena met and married my grandfather, Walter Tichauer, who was born in Gleiwitz, Germany in 1907. He was a gifted glazier who had attended a prestigious school in Germany. Thankfully, he was able to leave Germany after being imprisoned for just 1 week in the concentration camp Buchenwald after Kristallnacht, due to his parents starting the immigration process for him before the war began. Once the paperwork was approved, miraculously, he was released and immigrated to Uruguay. Walter's parents and his 2 sisters were deported to Auschwitz and were never heard from again. Once in Uruguay, Walter tried to find out what happened to his family with the help of the Red Cross, but he was never successful. Walter died in January 1992. I want to share my grandfather Walter's family. Standing in the center is my grandfather Walter with his parents on his side, Joseph and Elfrida. And unfortunately, I don't know who the little girl and the other gentleman in the picture are. And here is a picture of Walter's sisters, Edith and Marguerite. In Uruguay, Walter and Helena led a very comfortable and happy life. It was there that my father Fred and my uncle Carl were born. In 1963, with the unrest created after Fidel Castro took control of Cuba, the Tichauer family and Carolina did not feel safe in Uruguay. They originally planned to move to Israel, but at the insistence of Helena's sister Lola, who already lived in Omaha, they stopped there first. The family fell in love with Omaha and decided to stay. In 1967, Carolina passed away at the age of 63. Here are my grandparents, Walter and Helena Tichauer. After the horror and pain of Helena's Holocaust experience, she managed to find the love of her life, have 2 sons, and create a new life for herself and her children with Walter in the United States, a country she loved. Helena was a grandmother to 5, and her grandchildren went on to have 13 of their own children. Sadly, Helena passed away in October 2012, just 2 months before her 90th birthday. Helena's greatest joy was her family, her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. Her family was and still is the ultimate victory against Hitler. If you would have asked Helena where she found the strength and courage to continue to fight during her darkest days and to never give up, she would have told you it came from her father. Despite the horror of all he and their family had been through, he was a forever optimist and never gave up hope. He told his children every day that better days were coming, to keep fighting and to never give up on living. That's advice we should all live by. My grandmother was a fiery, strong, opinionated, smart, and willful lady. She was small in size, but had a giant-like presence. One of her favorite sayings was, "All good things come in small packages," in referring to herself. She held fast to her beliefs and wouldn't back down from a fight of any kind. It's that spirit that I know led to her survival and to her helping her mother survive during the Holocaust. It's also the way she lived her life. She wasn't one to complain, feel sorry for herself, or take the gift of life she had been given for granted. She was a proud Jew and an American. She loved politics and loved helping people through her volunteer work. She was an excellent cook and hostess and was happiest surrounded by her family and friends. Most importantly, she believed that all human beings were created equally and deserved to be treated as such. Helena said the following about the Holocaust: "I don't wish on my worst enemy what occurred. That's why we have to remember, not because it happened to Jews, because it's happened to many nationalities and religions. They're humans, they are people, they have a soul, they have feelings, and this is what counts." In commenting about her ability to start over in Sweden, Uruguay, and then in the United States, she went on to say, "That's the story of my life. I'm still alive. I still go on. Maybe this was destiny for me. I believe in destiny." I'm not sure what my own destiny holds, but I know after my 2018 trip to Germany and Poland that I wasn't the same person I was before the trip. Nothing in my life could have prepared me for what I would see and experience, not only in the camps, but also in finding some of the pieces of my family puzzle. The feelings I felt, the agony of knowing the hell on earth my grandparents endured to survive the Holocaust and its aftermath, along with the horror of realizing more of my family than I can count were brutally murdered, was almost unbearable. For much of the trip, I was numb, but as I started to process my feelings and what I'd seen, I became horrified, repulsed, physically ill, brokenhearted, and furious all at the same time. I've never experienced anything that has changed my thoughts, feelings, and beliefs and made me question humanity as I have since I was on that trip, and I imagine I never will again. I was forever changed. That change led me to do something, and I decided to go back to school to get my master's in Holocaust and Genocide Studies and to dive deeply into researching my family's genealogy and Holocaust history so I could combine my personal story and that of my family's to help others about educate others about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. With the exponential rise of anti-Semitism, the world as of late has become a place that sometimes doesn't feel safe if you're Jewish. A renowned scholar of the Holocaust, Yehuda Bauer, said it well when he explained that anti-Semitism isn't just dangerous to Jews, it's dangerous to the society in which it grows. Let's not forget Hitler murdered millions of non-Jews, whom he also deemed unfit for life. Remember, the hate that begins with Jews never ends with Jews. In honor of the 6 million Jews that perished, we must continue to commemorate, educate, and never stop learning about the Holocaust. Simply saying never again isn't enough. We have to do something, continue learning, educate others, speak up, speak out, support Jewish people and Jewish communities in person and online. Get involved. Stop allowing people to laugh off anti-Semitism as a joke. It's not funny. Everyone needs to know anti-Semitism is unacceptable and won't be tolerated. Anti-Semitism isn't a comedy act. It's not just an innocent or harmless social media meme, and it is definitely not something only crazy people say or do. Anti-Semitic words and actions have power and real-world consequences. Joseph Goebbels, the master propagandist of the Nazi Party, would agree. To learn from history and for prevention, especially as the survivor community becomes smaller and smaller, We have to keep talking and learning about the Holocaust, even if it means having difficult, uncomfortable, and painful conversations about the past. There are valuable lessons from the Holocaust about hatred, prejudice, racism, dehumanization, human behavior, power, politics, scapegoating, propaganda, peer pressure, human rights, the warning signs of genocide, societal expectations, and on and on and on. As I said when I was 13 in 1989, we must be the teachers. I am extremely passionate about my family's story, Holocaust education, and anti-Semitism, and take each of them very seriously. I know my grandparents, Walter, Helena, Ben, and Mina, who are the ultimate definition of survivors, along with my family that never had the opportunity to speak out, would want me to loudly and proudly share their stories in hopes of educating others. May their memories and all that perished in the Holocaust be for a blessing. The journey I started to travel as a teen has come full circle. I know I have a unique legacy, and with that, I believe I have a responsibility. I'm committed, and most importantly, I have the incredible power of a personal story and a passion to share it with others to help ensure the Holocaust, along with the memory of my family, is never forgotten. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to listening to me speak today. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you. Jesus, if I can talk. That was amazing. That was absolutely incredible. If you would just take yourself off shared so that we can just get everybody. And thank you also for quoting Yehuda Bauer, one of the most important educators I've ever studied from. We have time for questions. And please just take yourself off mute. And if you have questions for Kelly.
Kelly, it's Steve Weiss. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Is what assistance you had in retrieving these documents you've shown. How were you able to trace these? And were these in archives? Did you have archivists dig them out for you?
No, I didn't. Actually, a lot of them came from Errolson Archives. So they will actually do a search for you on behalf of whoever it is that you're searching for. So you can just go to their website and you fill out a form and they'll search for you. You can also search on your own as well. So that's how I found a lot of the documents. Also, I found some through the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Jewish Gen. I can't even think of all the websites off the top of my head because I start going down a rabbit hole, to be honest. But I would say a majority of them have been from Errolson. The United States Holocaust Museum will actually also do a search for you as well. Yad Vashem, I found some things too. So just kind of random selection of places. But without some of those documents, specifically on my mother's side of the family, we would almost have no idea whatsoever because they did not speak about their experience. So those documents have been incredibly important.
Do you feel that you're going to find anywhere from your mother or on your mother's side? I mean, is there, are you getting anywhere in your search?
You know, the little bit that I do have is literally because I've just been digging and digging and digging, and I'm trying to kind of piece together the little bit of, you know, documentation that I have. And I'm hoping that I'm translating, like doing Google Translate German to English, you know, and trying to, you know, figure out dates and when and where, obviously, because all of it's in German. So I still have a lot of things I can kind of look through, but I'm definitely moving in the right direction.
We had a question, if you could share the Errolson website, if you have the link for it in chat, that would be great.
I think if you just Google Errolson, you'll get right to it.
Yeah, I could, but I don't know. I'd probably like mess up this.
No, though Steve just gave us, if you Google the word, great. Other questions for Kelly?
Yeah, I have one other question. Did your grandparents leave any video testimony?
Yeah, my paternal grandmother, yes, Helena did. She was interviewed for the Show Off Foundation, I think like 1994. So we do have video of her, but none of my other grandparents, unfortunately.
We have in our collection, in our archives, I think we have I have to look about the video, but I know for sure we have the transcript because it was used within the playwright who did When We Go Away. The Helena story was weaved into that story.
Kelly, was there a particular reason to incorporate some of the video into your presentation?
That I did not.
Yes.
To be honest, I would like to do that. This is literally the first time I've ever spoken publicly, and this is the first presentation I put together. So with school and just everything else going on, I just have not done that yet. But like, as I move forward and continue to speak and tell this story, that is something that I definitely would like to do, just because I think it's so visually, impactful on so many levels for people to actually hear her speak. But I don't know how to do that either, so I'm going to need some
We'd be
help
happy to assist.
with the tech side.
Be happy to assist you.
Perfect.
Other questions? First of all, we'd love to have you as a part of our speakers bureau. Your talk is very impactful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Well, Kelly, thank you very, very much. Again, this was incredibly moving, and I hope that this is, I know this is just the beginning of many talks that you'll be giving, and we're glad to have you be able to, we'll find audiences for you. We have lots of places that want speakers, and I think the story is incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. It truly our honor. Next month, Jane Nesbitt, our education coordinator, is going to be speaking about the narrative in terms of, based upon that, often people think there was one diary, and that being of Anne Frank. And there were lots and lots of them, and she's going to be speaking about some of them through a book and source called Salvage Pages. And we look forward next month to learning with Jane. And if you want to participate, we now have your email. If you're new, if this is your first time, you'll receive the link for every third Thursday. And again, Kelly, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.